Good afternoon, and my name is Henrik Kuusla, and I would like to welcome you to the Marja 01 Investor Collective hosted by Voima Ventures. The Investor Collective is an initiative brought up by the in-house investors alongside with the Marja 01 team. The objective of the series is to bring the in-house investors and the startups closer to one another, and in doing so, creating new learnings and new connections. Today's event is hosted by Voima Venture, an investor focusing on deep tech. And the host of today is the founder and managing partner of Voima Ventures, Inka Mero. Once again, welcome.
Thank you, and welcome on our behalf as well. I think the theme of today is extremely interesting and exciting due to the fact that we see growingly more and more deep tech startups and hardware-related companies here in the Nordics. Just to give you a bit of a big picture on the numbers, in the Nordics and Baltics, we have roughly around 10,000 startups, of which around 20 to 30% could be considered to be in the deep tech space. And often deep tech relates to new materials, something around photonics or optics, quantum computing, IoT and sensing. So there's always a hardware element relating there too. Very rarely there is a purely software-based deep tech company building a scalable new business. However, those of course exist as well. But scaling hardware is super difficult. We know it by the fact that we see less of a company succeeding there. However, we could also claim that there is a exponential technology development curve now, and actually many of the future's big problems could be solved by deep tech hardware companies, whether that's quantum computing or something else. Hence, we've gathered for you to get some learnings to the ecosystem. Excellent panel. Basically, a group of people with prestige experience. Basically, we have two founders, Nadine. We have also Mikko Möttönen from IQAM and Jyrki Saarinen with a long experience in the areas of optics and photonics in terms of building his own companies and as a professor. And the whole objective here is to have a dialogue. We're going to talk about what building of a deep tech hardware startup means, and what does scaling of a deep tech hardware startup mean. Luckily, we also see a furthermore growing global investor interest to Nordics in this space. And maybe this is an area where we can capture the future value growth in terms of companies growing to global markets, but also succeeding in terms of generating great returns for their founders and investors, maybe even listing of deep tech hardware companies in the future. But let's get going. And my first panelist here who I'm going to introduce is Nadine. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Inka.
And so you have a fascinating background. You're originally French.
That's correct, yes. Bonjour.
Bonjour, ça va?
Ça va très bien. Bonjour à tous.
I've had a luxury of upgrading my French with my kids recently, so maybe we'll take this lesson later. But you've done your PhD. I think you did it in France first.
No, in US actually.
In US, and you've done a quite substantial career as a researcher or scientific researcher first, but then you founded a agri-tech company called Quanturi. Maybe you just very briefly introduce us what Quanturi does.
Yes, well, Quanturi is actually a leader in monitoring something not exactly sexy, but monitoring fermentable materials. So all the different materials that are stored by the agriculture and also by composting industries. So we have IoT systems monitoring different type of materials like grain, hay, compost, and telling what's the state of the material. So whether it's still good, the quality is good, and we want to prevent losses.
And you founded the startup a few years back.
Yes, that was back in 2015.
And when you founded the company, did you take the topic of today, scaling, into account? And if you did, how? And if you didn't, what would you do now differently?
Well, honestly, not at all. And the best is to give an example. So as I said, like we are selling some IoT systems. So we have like probes, wireless probes. They can go in size from 40 centimeters, 2 meters, 3 meters, 4 meters. So we are shipping products that go from 2 kilos to 50 kilos. And when we started, actually, we focused on a business line that was for hay monitoring. And we were rushing developing this product as we have really seasonal product. And well, we sold the product, but then came to the time when we had to ship the product. And we were shipping the product for 600 euros, but because we had designed a product that had a special shape, then shipping it was for 70 euros. So, the customer doesn't want to pay 70 euros for shipping. And the reason behind is that we did not really think about manufacturability, how to design a product that you can take to mass production. So that was actually like one key issue. But at the same time, I think that's really a dilemma for like startup companies, as you're a startup company. So by default, you don't even know how like the product is going to look like, what type of product you should take on the market. And you want to be fast. So you don't want to put too heavy processes either. So that's, but you want to be first on the market. So that was basically the dilemma in manufacturability and being quick and agile on the market.
So maybe just as a quick curiosity, how many generations of hardware or product did you make before you got it into manufacturability?
I would say 3, yes.
Yeah.
And we could definitely maybe have done it in only 2 by taking into this account from the start. But again, we would have maybe been late for the season.
Absolutely. So maybe actually prioritizing the fast go-to-market in a way helped you to accelerate some other learnings.
Yes.
Okay. So Mikko, obviously in the context of quantum computing, it's a bit of a different thing, but let me introduce you first. Mikko Möttönen is a professor of quantum computing, and he's also the founder of IQAM quantum computer company. You have a fantastic career as a researcher and several hundreds of publications, and now you're building something on the top tier edge of the European quantum ecosystem. But do you think about scaling or scalability, and what does it actually mean in your company's context?
Great, thanks for the question. Like from the very beginning, we knew that we have to grow. I mean, we took growing into our plans, and maybe to some extent scaling as well, but as you said, to actually be able to really scale up, we need quantum advantage for businesses, provide that, and it's kind of in a way technology challenge as well as a business challenge, and that is a good question. I think we are adjusting our plans all the time.
So in a way, you're basically now saying that you have a big vision, and the big vision is that the quantum computing as such will work someday, and you will be leading company in that area. But you have moving target, the business use case target, and then the actual manufacturing as well, or?
Exactly. So that we do understand that at the point where the really market breaks, there's a breaking point when the market just expands. Now it's basically this research and education machines that we sell. So the market is very small compared to the full market potential that there is in a couple of years. So there we really need to be kind of well prepared. And I think very soon is the time to start to really do the actions in practice to prepare for that.
So in terms of a quantum, you obviously see a lot of companies in that area, or growing number of companies. Has any company yet hit scalability in terms of a quantum computing, and in what extent?
Well, not in the terms that I speak about scalability. So when I speak about scalability in quantum, I mean that there is really, you can provide business benefits to other businesses, then in the end-to-end customers as well. In practical problems, you can solve them faster, cheaper, or more accurately. And in that sense, no company has yet reached that point where it's a point where your sales, your revenue start to shoot up, and the one who is there first and the one who is prepared for that few years before, then that will take major part of the market.
But I think we can see an analogy maybe 10 or 15 years ago when we started to see the platform economy to hit. It basically still we have these huge global platform economy companies which are not yet profitable but are kind of growing extremely fast and gathering a huge amount of shareholder value. So in that respect, I think it's a good example how kind of a new technology defines new rules for the business as such. But maybe we'll continue with our third panelist, Jyrki Saarinen. Welcome. So today you're a professor of optics and photonics in Joensuu University, and I think you're specialized even business related there too. And this is thanks to your massive and long background as both entrepreneur and a scientist. You were a founder at Heptagon, which was one of the most successful European stories around optics and let's say microelectronics as such. And you worked several years in California. So when you listen to this maybe younger generation of founders, what would you still emphasize in this question of preparing your hardware company to scalability? And what were the learnings that you had at Heptagon, and how would you kind of share those?
Yeah, so of course, let's say, I think that when you ask about whether the scalability is the one in the very beginning of the agenda, and it shouldn't be there because it's a survivor, it's a surviving, it's really about that you survive. And so that's why also, let's say the scalability is not there at the top of the discussion. Also, it's very hard because you don't know what is the product, how it looks like. Are you going to have big kind of subcontractors and so on? So it's difficult to start scaling up. But the scalability is definitely very, very important. In my company, in Heptagon, we had also another kind of issue because we were a technology company and we had several kind of business opportunities. So the question was also that what business is the good enough, so large enough? So we decided to scale up to the certain level, to the certain market. We saw opportunities to go to the bigger markets, and then let's say the scalability meant completely different thing to our company. And I sometimes calculated that actually the fifth business plan, the fifth product for us was the right let's say level of let's say the market and the revenue that we wanted to aim. So the scalability is also means about, let's say that what is the market that you are trying to end up. But yeah, it's very difficult to get into that end, but that's highly important about.
So maybe we could actually talk briefly about the stage, what happens before you kind of get that mass volume order, which you often is called as a design win with electronics industry or OEM industry, or a mass volume order from any of your customers. What kind of business model had Heptagon kind of prior that design win phase? Did you take everything at your own risk, or did you have R&D, so-called non-recurring engineering projects from your customers?
Yeah.
Or how did you build that portfolio?
Yeah, actually, we did have our own R&D. Actually, some people even complained that you are actually making all the R&D with the expense of the customers. But that was, of course, I would say that it was important also because our background was also in the science and the university and research institute world from Finland and Switzerland. And it was so important that the people start listening to the customers so that they don't start do their own R&D, which is fun to do. So that's why it was very important that kind of I forced that all the R&D is actually customer related.
If I may rebound to what you're saying, this is definitely something that we learn at Quantur is that, yes, of course, customer is you have to listen to your customer. At the end of the day, you're selling a product to a customer. But you also have to focus. And what you said, in having different business lines, it's exactly like that. If you want to scale, then you have to focus. For us, we have defined really standard products. We have lots of inquiries for measuring whatever type of material, you name it. But you have to learn to say no. and focus on really the key one. So yes, we have set up, for instance, like really like listening to what the customer and really quantifying what the customer would like to have, or like some prospect would like to have in terms of different features. And at some point, if that really becomes like really a key thing, then you will start going after that. But otherwise, focus is definitely like major point.
It's as an investor, we see a lot of deep tech hardware companies that have exactly what you described, Jyrki, that there are so many application areas they could go into, and it can be automotive or consumer electronics. And then suddenly a small team of 10 people is trying to do huge industries. And this is the question of like where to focus. But it's sometimes very difficult to define which application or solution to choose. Do you have, Mikko, same dilemma at IQAM, like too many opportunities?
Definitely.
Indefinitely, I guess.
Yeah, because exactly what you said. We get calls that we would like to have this and these tweaks into this and this machine, and then that's not really going to sell a lot. And we want to focus on getting a working quantum computer built, and even that we of course focus on the hardware, but then what do you use the hardware for? And there is now our critical choices that will come up very soon. That what we want to do is we want to tailor the hardware to solve a specific problem. This way we think that we can get earlier the advantage to the actual end user or the customer. So here we can't go everywhere because then we end up nowhere, right? So we really need to then pick, let's say 1 to 3, max 3 of these possible use cases there, and then put the shots.
So how do you pick them? What are your criteria?
Well, we have a team, like we have actually in Munich, we have a branch there or a subsidiary company, and they are really focused on kind of doing the sort of studies and feasibility studies and early sort of research on what is then the most successful or likely way to go. And they also talk to their customers, the big companies. Many of them are based in Munich conveniently, and having this interaction with the potential customers and doing the research. Then we of course first look on many options, but then we have to narrow down, and then we have to go for the most promising ones.
Nadine, you mentioned that you didn't take scalability into account in the very beginning, but I think in terms of taking things into account is also very much a team-related question. Diversity, backgrounds, experience, maybe industry experience. Sometimes it's good to have it, sometimes you might not want to have it if you want to break the industry. So what kind of talents you see that and that hardware deep tech companies would require, and could you kind of elaborate the founding team a little bit and maybe growing the talent?
Yeah, and I guess actually for scaling hardware companies, it's really, and that might be like one of the challenge of hardware companies, is that when you're making products, it's really to have different type of talents. When we started the company in Quanturi, we were 2 founders. So I'm have a hardware background, and the second founder is a software engineer. So we already were complementing each other. But I guess at the first, when you start the company, then you need to have more technical skills, because you need to deliver the product. You need to get it out there. But then as you grow and as you scale, then you will be adding more and more processes. So you will add product engineers, quality engineers, testing engineers. You will build up also like more the whole infrastructure in terms of, for instance, ERP system, so that you have everything under the whole hood. You know where you're going, you know what you're doing. And obviously, like you build up also like the sales processes as well. So that also requires some different skills. So I would say that at each stage, it's paid.
Yeah, so each stage requires new kinds of talent.
Yes.
Do we have a shortage of talent? Maybe Jyrki, you could answer this, as you're also founding many optics photonics related startups, and I'm wondering, like, do we have the right kinds of talent or skill sets here in the Nordics, and are we missing something?
I think that one challenge is, of course, that many of these things, if you scale up and become a volume manufacturer, you don't need any more kind of entrepreneurial skills there. You need some experience more. And then the question is that are you able, as a startup, as a small company, to attract those heavy professional people who are running these kind of volumes already in the existing company? So I would say that yes, there are these kind of people available, but no, people are there, but are they available for the startups? Because you need to somehow, let's say, attract them very early stage. That, hey, come on, we have only 10 people, but we are going to be 1,000 people soon, and we are going to have that kind of manufacturing. So I would say that that's a challenge. But of course, I'd say the good thing is that people are getting more and more excited about the startups.
And have you succeeded in, let's say, luring super expertise to your own startups now? And could you share some advice for the people in the audience how to do that? You know, how to find this kind of people and how to take the discussion forward with them?
Yeah, I think, of course, first you want to identify what kind of people you need. And then, of course, through the networks, you have to find these people. I mean, many times they are even almost retired people or whatever, who are then excited to do something else and step into join to the smaller company. So, and then, of course, let's say one thing is that you as a co-founder or the founder of the company, you are the one that you have to get people excited. So let's say if I spend a lot of time for getting customers excited about my product, I spend almost more time with potential new employees to get them excited and sell the company to them.
That's an excellent advice. I'm sure that also your, let's say, startup brand has an impact on like how do you attract or retain talent. Mikko, has IQAM's, let's say, you've had a quite massive visibility. Has that helped?
Absolutely, yeah. I think like after we hit 60 people or something, after that, we started to get really, really good candidates for our jobs. And we were actually able to exactly hire now, like from the early startup phase, you don't have all these HR managers and whatever, and sales and business heads, etc. But then we started to realize, okay, these are the people we need. The company is growing soon, 100 people, and yeah, I mean, the good visibility, I think the good sort of brand, and also maybe we are in a way lucky that somehow quantum computers is now, all over the news, and people are genuinely somehow excited and they are waiting and, and they want to do their part. So I mean, all of these actually have worked for us.
Excellent. Nadine, how have you built your team, and what are the, let's say, networks or routes that you've used to attract talent?
I'm kind of laughing because if you have visibility, like us, we are monitoring compost, so sorry, but we are monitoring shit. So that's not exactly really like attractive. So, but yes, for us, the team building has been really the most difficult and the most surprising actually for me. All the investors are telling you that they're investing in a team. And I do understand that after going through that. So yes, it's been quite a journey to find the right team for us. But all the members, basically, it's through network. That's really like how it works.
I'd still like to continue from this customer centricity. I think all of the startups who are in the software space nowadays talk about, being agile. They learn from the customers. They take their MVP to them very super fast. Still, maybe I'm generalizing a bit, and please counter argue if you disagree, but I do still see a lot of hardware deep tech startups doing their stuff in the labs. and then, we're about to get ready. We'll start talking to the customers at some point of time. Or yes, we have these big R&D collaboration partners, but in reality, the customer feedback is missing. Jyrki, would you agree or disagree, and how to change that?
Yeah, I fully agree on that. One thing is, of course, let's say don't do any own R&D, so do it only with the customers. So then you have to show them the results already in the early stage.
So it's a selling task. You need to convince customer that, this is the future product we want to build. By the way, we're going to own the IPRs, and B, you're gonna pay for it.
Yeah, and half in advance.
Okay, excellent.
Well, your MVP, your minimal viable product, is really like the key thing, and you should put as little features as you can so that you can release it and test it right away as fast as possible.
So how about a quantum computer?
Well, yeah, that will take some time in a sense. I mean, it depends. I mean, now it seems that more and more of this research and education quantum computers actually are desired around the world. So of course you could have like a working business by selling them and upgrading them, and that's of course how we are generating now our first revenues. To really get to this minimal viable product in quantum computers, in the true scaling, it may be a bit more too much to ask from a single customer to pay hundreds of millions of euros, and then we create it. So that's why we do actually at IQAM we do need our own research, and that's why we also need heavy investments.
Customer learnings, I think, in vis-a-vis to hardware often comes to, let's say, meeting their end product criteria or qualities, and understanding that is quite essential. For example, in consumer electronics. And once you start creating a process around that with the customer, then the next step, typically, the good sign and the bad sign is when the sourcing walks in. And the sourcing department, obviously, is the one who will start discussing the terms and maybe your ability to scale. Have you any experiences on these sourcing discussions, and how have you conquered those challenging?
Well, yes, that's basically like one of your pitfall for scaling. Like having like partnership with a manufacturing company is definitely like a key, and that's really tough for like a small company that might have like 1,000 products to make, which is a lot for a startup company, but which is peanuts for a subcontracted company, and you might end up being at the end of the line, not being the priority, having delays in deliveries. So that's definitely the challenge in finding the right partners for manufacturing. And I think that these partners should come in the loop really from the early stage, quite early, so that you take them in.
Yeah, well, exactly. I hear your complaints. When we talk to the silicon,
no, we have a really good manufacturing company.
Big foundries that are doing, computer chips. They are talking about billions and billions, and when we come and we say, we just need a few wafers or something, it's so little for them. But of course, they should not take it from the business point of view now. But they should take it then from the, investing to the future. And that's sometimes you have to just talk to the right people to make them understand.
Yeah.
And in Heptagon, did you do your own manufacture, or did you have the manufacturing partners?
No, we did our own manufacturing.
Yeah. And maybe you could talk about that journey. Why did you choose to do that?
Yeah, that's also a very interesting thing about, and important thing about, think always about what you can outsource, what you should do yourself. And be very, don't try to do everything. So always try to, let's say the first priority would be to outsource, and only then decide to do something if it's necessary. Either because it's so difficult that you can't find any other manufacturers, or it's so essential, there are so many IPR or things that you haven't patented that you want to keep it yourself.
So was it the reason why you actually went to do it by yourself?
Yes. So I would say that almost half of our IPR was not patented because it was really in the manufacturing, and you cannot, even if you patent that, you cannot enforce the patents because you cannot prove that somebody's violating your patent. So that's why, let's say the core, you have to think about that. What is the unique thing what you are doing? What is the core thing what you are doing? And if that's in the manufacturing, you should keep it. But then there are so many other things in the manufacturing. So then you should try to outsource as much as possible.
Yeah, there was this one article said that manufacturing actually kills more startups than the lack of funding. Is there any wisdom behind this statement?
Well, first of all, as we said, like outsourcing, having the right manufacturing partners would be one pitfall. Second one is definitely margin, something that, at first when you sell a product, you might be the only one selling the product. It's direct sales. You can maybe afford margin. That's 50%. Someone should remember that 50% means that once you have sold the product, you just have enough money to make the second product. So of course, when you scale, you need more funds for that. But once you scale, then you the selling processes is changing. You are adding some maybe distributor number 1, distributor number 2. All of them are wants 30% of margin, and eventually you are left with nothing. So margin is definitely like something. Margin that goes back also to manufacturability and minimum, like having like BOM as low as possible, so that you can have like a viable company.
Yeah.
For quantum processors, this is extremely, essential question, because there is no foundry that can produce as good chips as we would need. So there is a lot of still R&D, a lot of development we have to do there, and the manufacturing plants are expensive. I mean, this clean room, even the building is super expensive. There's all the space, all the equipment there. It's really expensive, and you really need to cherry pick the best ones and the ones that you have the highest chances of success. So I think, and also the investors are not so keen on pouring a lot of money to basically to infrastructure. So that's, I think, where we need some help from the governments and from other players.
And sounds even that you kind of need an ecosystem which is still formulating. Traditional industries like car manufacturers or mobile phones have their own ecosystems. What are we still missing from the quantum ecosystem? What kind of companies do we need more?
Well, that is exactly like what our take has been here, that if somebody is building something better than you have or as good as you have, and you have a certainty that this is this company will stay and then will do this. Of course, we would like to partner with such companies and put that stuff into our machines. We have a long list of subcontractors. Of course, it's a huge list, but I think that list can still increase in the future. So because there's so many, it's a huge machine. There's so many little pieces, nuts and bolts and wires and also the software and the electronics in many different stages, and the cryogenics. There's a lot of things, and I think we really need like the best ideas and the best sort of startup now, also focusing on parts of it.
Exactly. Like let's say we've seen in the old traditional industries, kind of a innovation happening and so forth. Is there a question of IPRs in quantum ecosystem? Because in many cases in hardware, as Jyrki pointed out, you kind of had to protect your IP actually by manufacturing yourself.
Yeah, and I completely agree with Jyrki that this manufacturing capabilities we have to build in Finland, because that is the key. I mean, if you don't have that, if somebody tells you, we're not going to anymore make your chips, then you're out completely from the game. So we have to have the capability, at least now, before the mass production starts. And what was the other question?
Yeah, it was just about the kind of a capability to do it yourself, and why should we drive for that? So,
yeah, in the manufacturing, I completely agree. Yeah.
Nadine, how do you see this kind of a capability to manufacture yourself or using suppliers? Would you see it essential in the beginning, or were you able to rely on partners?
Well, we worked with a partner almost right from the start. Started with like simple, like having some electronics made by the partners, and slowly building up the relationship with them, and then building up our own manufacturing line. So we outsourced completely the manufacturing lines. For us, there was no point of having that in-house. After doing it ourselves, I think that we were done with that. But so we still keep actually the made in Finland. Our manufacturing line is in Finland. We have to remember also that for us, for Quanturi, we have 95% of the revenues coming from export, and the made in Finland sells really well. It's a really good label, and we want to keep it as long as we can.
But in Heptagon, when you decided to go for manufacturing, you basically had to raise so much more funding, I guess. You had to justify that to your future investors and also to decide where to manufacture and how. Can you tell about that part of the journey? How much did you raise funding and where did you build the manufacturing?
Yeah, so first we built the manufacturing, let's say, just expanding the pilot line in Switzerland. But then, let's say, very soon we understood that when we really hit to the right market, so we had to start running the factory basically 3 shifts, so 24/7. It was impossible to do that in Switzerland. So we had to move the manufacturing elsewhere, and we went to Asia, and we did that to Singapore. And yeah, of course, let's say you have to, put 10 times or 100 times more investments what you have so far invested or raised funding when you start, because also we had to start building clean rooms and whatever. And usually one thing, what people they usually don't understand, and that I would say, okay, so one thing is also that we had also the similar interesting problem that in quantum computing, because this market doesn't exist yet. So there are not suppliers even who can do this. And in a way, also in our company, in Heptagon, we were kind of, let's say, we hit the market when the mobile phone camera started being, let's say, going to up with the volumes. And suddenly, nobody has ever manufactured millions of mobile cameras per week. That has not existed. And when we talked about the sourcing of the companies, so they said that, okay, we have to manually check every single camera. And then we ask, how do you do that when you go to the 1 million cameras per week? So there was a lot of kind of, let's say, discussion with the sourcing, because the old way of sourcing couldn't work anymore. When you are, and I think that will come also with the quantum technology, that there are so many new things that you have been able to make these in the lower volumes in labs and so on. And nobody even understands that and can set the requirements that if when we scale up, what does it really mean?
So I'm sure that you've seen also, let's say, successes or failures, whether relating to Heptagon or to the other startups. Could you share some of those, failures? Like, and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, so let's say, so that's really about us understanding what this manufacturability means.
Okay.
So really about that let's say I was working in this diffractive optics, micro-optics, which was a very fascinating area and still is, but really in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And when people were able to make a very fancy products, then when the customer said that, yeah, okay, we want to have a 10,000 to 100,000 1 month, then people said that, okay, I cannot do this. There's no way. These materials don't work. There are no suppliers for the materials. I don't have so many equipment. So people really didn't understand what this scalability and manufacturing in those volumes mean.
I've even seen some startups and some even medtech companies actually preparing for scaling like a couple of years. It can take quite a long time that you basically plan the actual production and have all the materials, all the suppliers online. You basically kind of get all the bits and pieces together. And that part still requires quite a lot of funding, not to mention the R&D phase before that. And we should obviously talk a little bit about this deep tech and hardware related funding. Typically, companies in this space raise maybe anything from 3x to 10x more funding, even in fairly early stages. Mikko, you've obviously succeeded in fundraising, so now you need to share some of your learnings in that process.
Well, we've succeeded so far.
Okay, but maybe you tell about the steps.
It's ongoing process, right?
So you continuously fundraise.
We have to, because it's such a big effort and so ambitious goal, and it's something that we feel that we can't just stop now, and to lay back and see that is this enough? It's not enough. We need to make it happen as fast as possible. And I think maybe one thing that you picked up is this, ambitious goals, enthusiasm. That's of course very important. The team is absolutely, the core, get many founders and founders with very, very high professional skills, and also the IP, of course, when you start in the very beginning, if you don't have any patents to transfer from universities or existing, that's going to be one of the red flags. And you gotta stay honest and be optimistic but very honest. So then all these pieces, when they go together, then you can succeed. And that was our seed funding round. Then our Series A1.
How much was it?
The seed funding was 11.5 million euros.
11.5 million. Okay.
And then we closed the Series A1 close to 39 million. So from the venture cap. So now we have about 50 million of that, and then we have some grants and also EIC equity component, which is 15 million. So it goes more than 17 million altogether. We've attracted now, but as I said, I think we need more.
So the next stage is to raise maybe 50 to 100 million, I guess.
We haven't announced it yet.
Okay. And so you constantly fundraise. And the requirements of the investors are obviously growing with the money. So and still, let's say, time to market with Quantum is, I don't know when is your time to market. Do you want to say it? But let's say it's a bit further away than maybe with some other hardware startups around.
Well, we have now our first sales, 10 million euro sales. So I think that's pretty good for a company.
That's excellent.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, some more than 1.5 years ago we got the seed funding round. So and we're looking into more of those, of course. But and it is true, like the investors are of course now looking into more professional teams, even But we take all the advice. Maybe that's the good advice to people, that take the advice and listen to many different people. Like listen to Inka, listen to your investors, and then if 2 of 3 or 4 out of 5 say something and you disagree, then you have to change your mind, right?
Yeah, it's a super good advice. Sometimes, of course, investors might give really bad advice as well. So I sometimes say, I think the best teams are the ones who listen, but also are able to filter.
Exactly. But if enough people are saying the same thing, think twice. So
I think we have some questions coming from the online audience quite soon, but we may basically continue still with the dialogue. I think, Nadine, I would be thrilled to hear, how do you plan for the future? How much and how do you build the kind of a growth story of Quanturi? And is it more like expanding in the kind of a product R&D and innovation, or expanding to new markets? And how do you kind of look at the growth? Future?
Well, so for us, of course, we are completely different for quantum computing. We have a product, we are selling it, and the growth is definitely for opening new markets. And that also, it's part of scalability. We have IoT systems, so we are talking about wireless systems, so new certifications, new type of products, because you don't work of the same frequency. So that's, of course, another challenge for scaling. So first is definitely to grow on different, enlarging the number of markets. And the second one is that, yes, we have our probes, we have our hardware, but it's what we do with that. It's definitely all the data that we are getting for bringing more and more services for the end users. So that eventually our end goal would be so that our products are so almost invisible that, that the end user sees only what all the analysis that we are giving them.
So it becomes more and more, let's say, data driven and analytics and predictive and all of that. You work
That's where manufacturability is again comes into the play, so that you find the right trick to decrease even more and more your BOM, so that the product gets almost as cheap as nothing.
So talk about this market expansion. What things to take into account? Many startups work with, let's say, independent consultants, all distributors or big partners. Would you recommend hiring your own sales personnel to go to the market, or would you rely on partners? Any learnings?
Well, both. Relying on partners. One of the things is that when they are not part of your company, then, well, the results are not as effective. You know, you have like many distributors that are promising you to sell your products by thousands. And at the end of the day, then, well, there's not really nothing happening. So for that, we prefer to have our own salespeople where it's like more effective. Of course, it's more costly.
Okay.
But as long as you have not like established really your reputation, then it's definitely like more efficient. Then eventually we will be like you, like people calling in to, you know, who wants to sell our product.
Jyrki, any experiences from your side?
Yeah. The problem with if you outsource the selling is that, because in my opinion, the most important job for selling in startup is listening, to collect information from the customers. What is wrong with your product? What they want to, what you should do elsewhere. And you don't get that information with the distributors. They don't collect the information, they don't listen, and you don't get that feedback. And that's completely missing. And so that's a problem. That's why you should have your own sales forces, at least in the very beginning, because then you can then trust that you get right information from the market.
That's super important. Finding those people, obviously, for example, from Asia or California, might not be the easiest thing to do. What would you do? Would you jump into a plane and start finding those, or what would be the route?
Networking.
Okay,
yeah.
So utilizing your investors, or basically.
Yeah,
and
also there's one thing what we are not using well enough in Finland is the expats. So there are so many Finns all around the globe that are willing and interested to help. And I spent 7 years in Silicon Valley, and I tried to go even to the events where Finns came to Silicon Valley for touring. And I was there kind of volunteering that, hey, come on, just ask me, I can build whatever kind of connections. And the Finns were just grouping alone with their own team and went back to the Finland. So you use expats more.
So I think we have a question from the audience. So Julia from Voima Ventures team will ask it, and let's see for whom it is.
Yes, actually we have a couple of questions now. Let's start with this one. Are there Nordic level deep tech startup communities you are constantly connected with, or how do you network with other companies in the same field?
So Nordic deep tech level communities, yes. Where do you connect? So let's, Mikko, if you start.
Well, I don't think that we have such a community in Quandum yet. We are networked, of course, in academic sort of ways. We have been, we know many of these local communities, and then we also have joint projects with some of them. But I think, we have also something that we call our own business club, which is a little bit different type of network. But yeah, I think such a network probably will exist at some point. But this is kind of an early stage of the industry, and it's.
Yeah, Finnish, let's say, of course, gaming scene was created through such a network, and that was a great way to also share and recruit talent. So maybe you'll build something like this, not necessarily to the Nordics, but to whole Europe. I think it's
in the whole Europe. Yes, there is like this Quandum flagship program. There's lots of efforts on. It is actually a big, huge network, and we are part of it. But it's not only for the companies. There's mostly it's academics, but now more and more companies are joining, and I think, and the European Quantum Industry Consortium, there is this kind of efforts now being built up.
What about Jyrki in the areas of optics and photonics?
Yeah, in photonics there are very good networks, and so it's very good. And one thing what I would kind of advise also, that when I went to the exhibitions, for example, so first I met maybe my existing customers, but then I went to see the competitors. So usually, let's say we forget them, that we should actually be closer. So there's a saying that you should keep the enemies closer than your friends, because that's also an important thing, especially because the competitors are not really competitors when you're talking about creating a completely new industry or market. So then it's important to share the information. Of course, you don't have to tell all the things and you give some white lies or whatever. and expand a little bit about the stories. But still, it's very important to talk and have those competitors in this ecosystem.
And just to come back to the communities, so there's Photonics Finland.
Yeah.
And then there are a few flagship programs ongoing around academia on photonics. Is there any hardware specific other related community that you would?
No, then Photonics 21,
okay.
Which is kind of officially representing the whole photonics community, and they are negotiating with the European Commission also about all the Horizon funding. And they are representing the academic and industry, so that's also very important.
Excellent. And Nadine?
Well, unfortunately, on the agri-tech sector in Finland, there's not much of agriculture in Finland, so it's quite limited, definitely. But because most of our sales or customership is basically out of Finland, then we've been building the network then out of Finland.
Okay.
So from countries where we do have the biggest network, the biggest market opportunity.
And I think France is one of them.
Yes, it's one of them, yes.
Excellent. We have a second question, I guess.
Yes, let's take another one quickly. So, how to tackle the struggles of scaling up hardware quickly and answers also quickly?
Well, we've obviously elaborated this one, but let's have quick answers. Maybe we're talking now about fairly early stage companies. So how to tackle the challenges of scaling up quickly? Is it actually about the hardware scalability or actually finding the right customers and use cases maybe?
I think that in every time when you talk about going to the certain market, or you have dreams about go to the automotive or medical or whatever, you have to stop and think about that. What does it really mean? So what does it really mean? So being there in the automotive industry, how many things I have to sell, and then you go to the deeper and deeper think about that. What does it really mean for the scale? It's so fun to talk about that. Yeah, we will make hundreds of quantum computers per month, but really about to stop and think about that. What does it really mean? What does it really mean in details about shipment, logistics, raw materials, everything?
Wise words from Jyrki, I would say. More questions?
Well, there is one more. So this is actually for Mikko. I would say IQAM is really great example of making people excited about quantum computing here in Finland. Can you address how it was in the early stages of IQAM?
Yeah, I think, I had for long the idea that, okay, maybe someday, we will start up some company. And I even wrote it to the grant applications that if you give me this money now, Academy of Finland, please, it might give rise to a quantum computer company. And actually, after the project, but actually it happened during the project.
Wow.
And because the time seemed to be right. There were already some startups in the world, but it was quite early still. We can now, if we start it, we can jump and we're not too late. And then there were some businessmen even visiting my lab and were interested in quantum computers and saying, why don't you start up a company? And that's kind of how it went. And then there were these great founders around, and we were a nice team and we made it happen.
So actually getting your founding team together wasn't that?
It was it wasn't very difficult because we had excellent people. We had excellent people around and very sort of already friends, so to say, and that was a great team. Of course. I must say that I was trying to, there were a few other people I tried to attract to be actually even founders, but then they didn't join at that point. Actually, one of them joined just recently. So
Okay. So there was a leap of faith done in that respect. Any advice on the founding team, Nadine?
Oh, well, again, the team is everything. You cannot scale without the right team.
So what to take into account as a founder?
This is so difficult. That's why what I've been really surprised by this whole journey, really quite often I thought one person would be great and finally not. It's just like a matter of personalities together.
Yes. So it's not only values, it's not only your skills, but it's also how you get the working together in a small team. What about Jyrki?
Yeah, you have to build this team from different kind of skills and disciplinary or whatever, because it's all, and you have to go outside the comfort zone. Because of course it's fun if you know all the people and they are thinking in the same way, they have the same background in the studies and so on. And it's really uncomfortable when you hire suddenly a person who is even their vocabulary is even different. You don't understand what they are, but you have to do that. So you have to forget that let's say it's so that you are not afraid to take these different kind of people who, and also that think in a different way. So there are these some let's say methods how you can for this team building, so that you even measure and test the people what they are. Are they kind of, let's say, idea creators, or are they kind of, let's say, people who are able to make the things happen, or what kind of they are? And you have to be able to find that kind of balance.
And hiring is never easy, and firing is either not easy. And I think that's part of the startup journey that I think every CEO entrepreneur has done at some point of time. But I think we've had, please.
Yeah, and that was kind of, let's say, that was really what is the challenge here in Finland, because when I was in US in Silicon Valley, so let's say there it was so easy to fire also people. So if the team was not right, they were able to find and let's say reconnect in the other companies and so on. But in Finland it's so kind of critical that you make the right hiring. Because it's not that easy to switch. Also, the people don't like that here. In Silicon Valley, people kind of understood that, okay, if I doesn't fit to this, or I not like this company, then I will just jump out and go to another one.
So I think this has been, let's say, super inspiring discussion, and we're already almost running out of time. So at this stage, I'd like to express my warm thank you for all of you for participating and sharing your learnings. And at least I learned a lot from this discussion. And I'd actually like to highlight this last point, which Jyrki said, that, be bold enough to build diversity from international context and very different kinds of AA people from the very beginning. And then also accepting the fact that it's not easy to build a great team. And maybe this great team will then take you to scalability. Is there anything you'd like to add here, or are we happy with this conclusion on the discussion? Fantastic.
I think that the worst thing is in the startups really that you start feeling well or good.
Content to yourself. Yeah. So having this healthy, unhappy feeling about your performance is the way to drive forward.
And there's some problems coming, so you have to find them now before before they hit you.
I'd also like to thank our audience, and thanks a lot for sending your online questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't address all of those, but I think what we agreed here is that if you have any comments or questions, or you'd like to follow up with any one of us, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can find our contact information on Twitter or online. So remember to be active, and hopefully this helped you in the next stage of building your deep tech startup. We also have some closing words from Maria team, so thank you on my behalf.
What a panel we had. I would like to once again thank the panelists, Nadine, Mikko, Möttönen and Jyrki Saarinen, and the host, Inka, Mero.